Welcome to Midday Update. I'm Jessie Chahal, giving you updates as to what's happening on the national and international front. On the show today, in local news, Tanjung Piai early voting has started earlier today. And of course, please also take note of this very special date, November 21st. Not many days from now, the UPSR and PPSR results will be announced. Also, a story on why 6 guardians were detained for the mischief of their kids, as well as Mike joins us shortly to walk us through the highlights of Najib's trial. And in our deep dive segment as well, we also, after that, will look at the international front. Did China make money on 11/11? And more on that later. But first, these are the top stories still running within the headlines and social media. First up, a total of 280 voters in the Tanjung Piai parliamentary by-election will be casting their ballots today. According to the EC chairman, Azhar Azizan Harun, all of them comprising personnel police and their spouses will vote at the Pontian police station's Perkip building. After the early voting, all the ballot boxes would be kept at the police station lockup and would only be opened for counting on the 16th of November at the vote tallying centre at the meeting room of the Pontian district office. Besides the 280 early voters, the electoral roll from the parliamentary seat has 52,698 ordinary votes and 8 absentee voters who are in fact abroad. Now, the contest is a 6-cornered fight which takes place this Saturday, the 16th of November. The Prime Minister invites Tanjung Piai voters for a mega ceramah. Pakatan Harapan Chairman Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad has called on voters and residents in Tanjung Piai to attend a mega ceramah tomorrow. In fact, he made the call via a 22-second video clip circulated amongst members of the media covering the by-election campaign in Tanjung Piai. The mega ceramah, as it's called, is aimed at reaching out to the locals. It's scheduled to be held at the Kukup Laut Bus Terminal. And still with the Prime Minister, Muslims must get the world on their side by highlighting injustices perpetrated by the Israelis against Palestinians. The Prime Minister says that this is not true at all, as all Europeans or Americans are against Islam. Muslims or Palestinians, as many are in fact sympathetic. However, he went on to say that the acts of terror do not help in winning support. Instead, it will push them towards supporting Israel. And for many students nationwide, big results will be announced on November 21st. That's right, the UPSR and PPSR results will be out. All Year 6 pupils can obtain their primary school assessment report, and that's PPSR, on November 21st at their respective schools from 10 a.m. onwards. The primary school achievement test, or the UPSR, for mainstream students, or primary school alternative assessment, PASR, for students with special needs, can also be collected from the schools. Pupils can also obtain their UPSR and PASR results through SMS technology. Simply type My SMS and send to 15888, and these results can also be obtained through the examination board's portal at this address, sppat.moe.gov.my/simakan. And still on the story about schools, a lawyer Muhammad Khairul Azam Abdul Aziz has failed to obtain leave to pursue his constitutional challenge at the federal court on the existence of vernacular schools. Chief Judge of Malaya Tan Sri Azhar Muhammad dismissed Muhammad Khairul's application on grounds that it was within the Parliament's power to form such schools. In his motion, which he had filed back in October this year, Muhammad Khairul sought a declaration from the federal court that it was unconstitutional for the Parliament to pass an amendment to Section 17 and 28 of the Education Act 1996 for the continued existence of vernacular schools in the country. In his judgment, the Chief Judge held that Parliament can formulate laws on education and matters auxiliary to it. The motion was filed last month, naming the Government of Malaysia and the Education Minister as respondents. Now, he contended that Chinese and Tamil national type schools established by the Minister of Education are contrary to Article 51521 of the Federal Constitution, which states that national language shall be the Malay language. From there, we move on to a story about a person, or rather the Persons with Disabilities Act 2008, and this, according to Ras Adiba, should be enhanced. The Persons with Disabilities Act 2008 needs to be amended, she says, to ensure that the rights of the people are protected and not abused. Veteran television personality Ras Adiba Razi has said that besides being the person who has founded the non-governmental organization OKU Central, added that the move was important to ensure that appropriate action was taken against those who misuse the facilities provided for the disabled. And we know that happens quite frequently. Now, she said the different rules and fines imposed by various authorities were not seen as effective enough in educating the public to respect the needs of the disabled community. Ras Adiba said people also needed to be made aware and, of course, thought on how to help and support the differently abled. Moving on to the next story, in what is surely an unprecedented move, police have detained 6 guardians for allowing their kids to participate in a dangerous activity known as the Bicycle Laja, or modified bicycle activities in the area of Ampang. Now, Ampang Jaya District Police Chief ACP Nur Azmi Yusof said they were detained under Section 33 of the Child Act 2001 for leaving their children without reasonable supervision. But they were later released on bail after having their statements recorded, and earlier 6 boys aged between 11 and 16 were detained at 8:51 p.m. the same day for riding Bicycle Laja and were taken to the Pandan Indah Traffic Police Station for further investigations. Now, the Bicycle Laja pastime is the act of turning cycling into dangerous stunt acts from a very young age. Dangerous indeed. Moving on to our next story, bus transportation services provider Terus Maju's Services Sdn Bhd says they will set up a manufacturing plant in Seremban to meet the increase in demand for buses, including electric buses, or better known as e-buses, for the ASEAN market. Managing Director K.S. Liu says initial production capacity is at 400 buses with a potential for up to 600 units at full capacity. After having exported buses to Singapore and Myanmar, they say they are now eyeing a Laos, hopefully, before the Chinese New Year season begins next year, followed by Cambodia and Vietnam. And on that note, we take a quick breather. When we come back, we're joined by Mikhail Raj Abdullah to break down and take a deep dive into the recent SRC case, of course, involving the previous Prime Minister. We'll be back right after this. And for our deep dive segment today, we take a look at the salient points in the prima facie case against former Prime Minister Datuk Seri Najib Razak, who has been ordered by the High Court to enter his defence for 7 charges in the ongoing SRC international trial, involving, of course, the misappropriation of 42 million ringgit in SRC funds. Mikhail Raj Abdullah joins us today. Welcome back to the studio, Mike. Thanks for being with us. So interesting. Of course, we were both in the office yesterday. We were listening, with bated breath to really understand what was going on in the courtroom. And once we got the updates, of course, that has left a lot of people having a lot of different conversations. To visiting what transpired yesterday, could you perhaps help shed some light and give us the salient points or the highlights coming out of this unprecedented case?
So it's a culmination of the trials since April. I'd just like to reiterate here that former Prime Minister Datuk Seri Najib Tun Razak is not guilty, has not been found guilty, only that we are entering the second phase, which means that in the first phase, the prima facie case has been established by the prosecution. That means now the defense has to mount a case to create reasonable doubt under the second phase. So the case will start on December the 3rd. So many are under the impression that he has been found guilty. No, he has not been found guilty. So he has got 7 charges where he has to put up his defense, because one of the issues of the defense is that the first phase is by the prosecution to prove there is some evidence to show that he is guilty. Let's get on with the case. See, and the Right Honourable Judge says there is a case.
Okay, so now we know there is a case. Prime Minister came out saying that he was shocked by what transpired. And of course, his lawyer as well, Shafi Abdullah, has said that the silver lining here is that the Prime Minister will now get to tell his side of the story. What do you foresee happening on the 3rd of December? Not much time left, in fact.
Because I'm not talking about, I'm not commenting specifically on this case and why he was shocked or things like that, but in generally, lawyers will say that about their clients to portray their clients as being innocent. So I think that's a general outcome, and I think it's only natural. But physically, why he was shocked, you have to get back to the Tan Sri Shafi Abdullah. So the other thing is that in this case, the ex-Prime Minister will come with a sworn statement, and he will take the stand. He will take the stand and he will be cross-examined. So this is unprecedented in judicial history in Malaysia, where a former Prime Minister will come for a criminal court case and answer questions.
So it is, of course, making national headlines as well as international news. What were some of the reactions from the defence team? Weren't people like Joe Low mentioned at all in any of the court proceedings?
I think Joe Low was mentioned. That has always been mentioned for so long. I think one of the things that Shafi said was that he will address his relationship with Joe Low and is going to dispute that never knew Joe Low had criminal intentions. He's not going to say he didn't know Joe Low, he had contacts with Joe Low, but he didn't know that. To quote him, you must bear in mind that in the case you must distinguish whether Najib was naive or too trusting from whether he was a criminal mind like that of Joe Low.
Right. There's a lot of course, talk about Najib's role as a shadow director as well with SRC. Would you be able to say anything about that?
But one of the things that the judge said that he was in a position in power. He was the Prime Minister. He was also the Minister of Finance. He was also the advisor to SRC, and he was in honorary. There's a lot of abuse of power and all that when he was in office. And also one of the issues is that the money was raised by Co-op for SRC, and somehow or other the money actually flowed into his personal account. So that's abuse of power, that's money laundering. So those are things are very clear. There was a case to be established, and he had to call for his defense.
Right. So the judge, or rather Justice Mohammad Nazlan, had given the ex-Prime Minister 3 options yesterday, of which he had chose one. One of the options was to give a sworn evidence in the witness box, otherwise to give an unsworn statement from the dock, or otherwise to remain silent. Of course, ex-Prime Minister Najib has, or rather chose to give a sworn statement or evidence in the witness box, where he will be subjected to cross-examination, and of course that will carry greater weightage.
More weightage. The other one, another different, can also give as an oath, unsworn statement, but doesn't carry weight, or can remain silent. In this case, he can come on the bench and tell the judges about what happened when he was the Prime Minister, because he had some duties that like under OSA, secrets he can't reveal to the country, so that he might be able to defend himself and tell exactly what happened in the Prime Minister's office as Minister of Finance.
Well, to be fair to him, we've not really heard much from him in terms of what really transpired, and perhaps to this cross-examination, there will be more insight as to the truth.
Yeah, because one of the things that the defense lawyer said that so far, under the first phase, it was the prosecution's witnesses. Right now, under the defense, they'll be able to call their witnesses to sort of put reasonable doubt on the case of the prosecution. And I understand that some of there are about 66 witnesses will be called, including former Governor Tan Sri Zati Akhtar Aziz and Tan Sri Nur Muhammad Yaakob. These are important people. They'll be able to throw more light. So in this case, Tan Sri Safi says that they'll have a better play in being able to defend their position, and everything will come to light. So
well, things are definitely heating up as well. How long do you think this trial will go on for? Do you have any idea of a timeline, perhaps?
Okay, he says that his defense case will be over in the first quarter of next year. After which, whatever decision is made, let's say he is found guilty, then he can go to the Court of Appeals. That will take some time. And he says the documents will take the height of a normal person, 3 times the height of a normal person. It will take a long time for them to understand it. And upon that, once the Court of Appeal is over, then he also can go to the federal court, and on a 7-bench court. So it will take a long time. And it is quite interesting for him to say that in response to a reporter's question as to when this whole process will be over, he says it actually go until the next general election, which is due on 2023. I don't know what he meant by that, but basically he was
exclamation mark.
But basically, I think he was telling it will take a long time. It's a very long time, and this is only one case.
Exactly.
Yeah,
how many more do we have?
We have about altogether in 5. 2 are already ongoing. And you must understand that even Tan Sri Shafi himself, there's a lot of case against him. A lot of people are involved. So I think this is going to take a long time.
That's right. Hard times for the teams, of course, working behind the scene, as we saw yesterday from some pictures and videos from the courtroom and at the courts as well. Overall, in summary, Mike, what do you have to say about the ongoing SRC case?
These are interesting times, and I think if May 9th was political consciousness among the people, this case will be like criminal court proceedings. You learn more about what's going on. You learn about prima facie. You learn about defense.
There was a bit of a misunderstanding with a lot of sectors prior to us announcing that.
Last Friday they thought there would be a verdict on Monday. No, it's not a verdict. It's just that the prosecution has submitted its case. It was successful in showing that there is ground for a case to carry on. So and then the second phase, defense has been called. So he must defend himself, and he has chosen the best way is to come on the stand and he will say something.
What are netizens saying online, or what conversations are there happening out there?
Nothing much has changed. Those who support him says this is politically, motivated. There are those who said that it was so clear in the early days, but there was no check and balance. But the court of law is the court of law. Truth must prevail. Justice must prevail.
Absolutely.
He must be given his time and all that. So that's why sometimes they say the wheels of justice take very slow to grind. So yes, it must take time. That no stone may be left unturned to ensure justice. So he must be given his time and space to prove himself beyond reasonable doubt that he is not guilty.
That's right. I can't wait for a movie of this to be out. I'm sure it's in the works somewhere. Thank you, Mike, for coming in. Of course, very interesting conversation. We will be keeping you updated as to the developments of the ongoing SRC case. Till then, we take a quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. Thanks. Welcome back to Midday Update. I'm Jessie Chahal. Of course, yesterday, historical day indeed, one that many people across the globe look forward to. 11/11 online sales, absolutely mad. Do you buy anything online? Well, China's Singles Day, booming Singles Day sales in China went out of the roof. Now, Chinese e-commerce giants Alibaba reported 268.4 billion Chinese yuan, basically $32 billion of sales on its platform for Singles Day, an annual marketing event that is the world's busiest online shopping day. Now, the day was a temporary relief for retailers that face fading demand as Chinese consumers tighten their belts, anxious over slowing economic growth and the tariff war with Washington. University students created Singles Day back in the 1990s as an alternative to Valentine's Day, who needs that, for people without romantic partners. Well, Alibaba adopted it as a marketing tool a decade ago, and rivals including JD.com, China's biggest online direct retailer, and electronics seller Suning joined in the fun as well. Now, this tactic has caught on in other Asian countries. For example, in Malaysia, the creators picked November 11 because the date is written with 4 singles, 1111. So Alibaba says that sales by merchants on its platforms had risen to $36.5 billion by 11 p.m. last night, after passing last year's full-day total of $30.8 billion before 6 p.m. E-commerce grew rapidly in China due to lack of traditional retailing networks and government's efforts to promote the use of internet. Brilliant idea. Well, the country has the biggest online population with more than 800 million web users. And of course, on the home front, other e-commerce platforms such as Shopee and Lazada as well raked in, being amongst the top 3 platforms to have crazy sales. Well, moving on from there, in Cuba, Havana has survived hurricanes, pirate attacks, and often fraught relationships with the United States. But despite it all, the city is now preparing to mark 5 centuries since its founding on November 16, 1519. Government workers are racing to put the finishing touches on monuments and buildings and public spaces ahead of the 500th anniversary on Saturday, and celebrations are expected to be all-encompassing. Now, the Jubilee will include a visit from the Spanish royal family and fireworks over the Malecon seaside promenade, in addition to hundreds of events at restored monuments and historic sites. Held their ground at Santiago's Plaza in Baquedano as demonstrations continued on Monday ahead of a national strike planned for today. Security forces used tear gas and water cannons while protesters attacked police vehicles with stones during the ongoing unrest. Now, Monday's protest came after a plan by President Sebastián Pinera to draft a new constitution, which was criticized by the opposition and even his own political ranks. Well, the opposition says Pinera's plan, one of a series of measures aimed at quelling weeks of protest, does not go far enough because it relies on current legislators who are viewed with distrust. So demonstrations in Chile began nearly a month ago over a subway fare hike, but has morphed into a massive movement over inequality and other wide-ranging grievances. While most protests have been peaceful, at least 20 people have died in clashes between protesters and the police. And moving on to the Spain-France border, hundreds of supporters took to the streets following a call to action by a secretive pro-Catalan independence group closing off a major highway border pass between France and Spain on Monday. French police in riot gear pushed protesters towards the Spanish side of the border, crossing between Spain and France, while a sit-down protest halted traffic along both sides of the AP7 highway at the major transportation hub of La Jonquera, a border point between Spain and France. Well, that has been the midday update with me, Jessie Chahel. Keep it locked on right here on Bernama TV as my colleague Tina Kauchi joins you with Bernama Today.